Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show, hosted by me, yours truly, Jeffrey Belomo, where we discuss all things estate planning and elder law, and, well, anything else we want to talk about. And today we are going to talk estate planning and elder law, and I'm really excited about this one. So this podcast today, we are going to talk a little bit about trusts and why trusts are so important and why trusts are becoming more and more important every single day. So this conversation that we're going to do today on this show is because of a conversation that I had with an advisor recently. And he has been working with me for, I don't know, probably about 18 years. And we are pretty good friends. And he came through the process recently with a client, which is very common. He often sends clients over, and throughout the years, we've been able to handle them. And after the process was over, he said to me, Jeff, I noticed that there's a little change in your practice and your focus and your workshops. Just overall, I've noticed a little bit of a change. And I said, oh, absolutely. What have you noticed? And he said, well, throughout the years, we've done a lot of wills together. Certainly, we had an occasional trust and people who wanted to protect their assets and who had enough that they felt that the cost justified doing the planning. But on, a lot of other cases, we ended up doing wills, whether we did asset protection after death in the wills or whether we did outright distributions in the will. We used a will quite a bit. But I noticed this last time that that has definitely shifted. That has definitely changed. I can sense in your tone, in your voice, and the way you're teaching the workshops, the way that Carrie and Dan are doing it, that that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And am I right? Did something happen? And I just sort of laughed and said, how much time do you have? And he looked at me with big wide eyes and said, how much time do I have? Holy cow. And I said, yeah, a lot of things happened. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know where to start. But yeah, so how much time do you have? And he said, well, I have a half hour. I said, all right, great. Let's talk about it. And after the conversation was over, I realized, this would be a great podcast. This would be an amazing podcast to do with our listeners, because I think that you're going to see this a lot more, not just from me, but others in the industry, others who are elder law attorneys, for a lot of reasons. But here we go. Let me kind of give you some of the thought process behind why you're seeing that trend and why I think you're going to continue to see trust becoming more and more prevalent each and every day. First and foremost, wills are great, right? But what do they do? They tell us what happens with our assets after we die. And generally speaking, for those of you who have been through my workshop, or if you listen to this podcast, you know that in my workshops and when I tell stories, I always tell the psychic story. I always read your will to you. I close my eyes. I hum, and then I read the will. And the reason I'm able to do that is because most lawyers use the exact same format. They use the exact same form. They have the same information in it, which essentially says everything to my wife outright, then to my children outright. My wife is the executrix, and if my wife can't do it, then it is, someone else, depending on who you want to act as the alternate executor. Great, certainly better than nothing. But if you think about it, right, what can go wrong? Whoa. Well, first of all, even before you die, you could end up needing long-term care. The average cost in Pennsylvania is over $14,000 a month for long-term care. Our single biggest creditor that we have coming is the nursing home. And I want to be very clear about this. I love the nursing homes. They do a great job. They do a great service. They are great people. It takes a special human being to be able to take care of people in the time of need and do things that others can't do. So I want to be really clear about that. The problem is our system. Our system is broke. It is not the nursing home. Stop blaming them. They deserve to be paid. And absolutely agreed 100%. But individuals and clients believe what? It will never happen to them, right? It will absolutely never happen. I heard a statistic the other day that 1 in 3 people are going to have some form of dementia or Alzheimer's, right? 1 in 3. And there are statistics that I've read that say 2 out of 3 are going to need some form of custodial long-term care, right? Some form of it. The other one I read that was shocking to me is that in Pennsylvania, there are 300 admissions to a nursing home daily. That is crazy. And to say and to look me in the eye and say, it won't happen to me, or it won't happen to my family or to my parents, or I'm going to take care of them. While I love the enthusiasm, while I love that you want to help and you want to step up for your loved ones, the truth is you may not be able to, right? If they start wandering, if they have issues that you're not equipped to handle, because you're not medically trained, it may not even be your choice, right? The protective services under the Area Agency on Aging, under the Adult Protective Services Act, has the right to keep people safe. They have the right to make the decision that you're not able to provide the care that you need to. And they too do a great service. They too, I am very, very, very fond of. But to tell me that it won't happen is naive. It happens all the time. I can't tell you how many clients we've had that call that choice was made for them and they didn't have a decision. They didn't have the ability to make the final call. So please understand that that is an issue. So with a will, we know that we are going to have to spend down our assets until we're essentially broke. And when you're talking about 14 grand a month, and if a husband and wife goes in, 28 to 30 grand a month, you do that math and you could be a multimillionaire and go broke in 5 years. So it is difficult to just say you don't need to worry about it or plan for it. And even if it works out right with the base will, and you do die and you don't end up losing everything, now the money goes outright to the spouse. Now the money goes outright to the kids. And that too is a significant issue. If you've ever been to my workshops, we tell story after story after story where a spouse ended up needing long-term care, where a child ended up losing everything or half of it to a divorce or all of it to creditors. I could go on for hours, which I will not do. And one of the lines in my workshop is always, you love your family way too much to give them the money outright. And I mean that. I say that. I mean it. I back it up. I tell you story after story after story. I'll spare you that today. But suffice it to say, asset protection after death is an essential component of your plan, 100%. And please don't forget that transfers on death are not subject to the look-back period. So if an individual comes into our office in a long-term care situation, we can plan potentially ahead, but it's going to take us 5 years. 5 years to get that trust fully funded and protected. But if we have it immediately put into trust at death, we can get those assets protected immediately. And even if we're able to do asset protection in crisis, which is still a possibility in Pennsylvania, you have to liquidate retirement accounts. Well, now we're going to lose 39% for most people of the assets. So 40%'s gone off the top. So that's not really doing exactly what we wanted. So I think that we need to discuss ways to protect those assets after death. Absolutely, unequivocally, 100%, 100%. So I did want to make sure I got on this podcast and got to say that. And of course, the advisor that day was, okay, all right, makes sense. But we had a twist. This is a fairly recent twist. I wrote a book that's coming out in the next couple months, so please stay tuned for that. There will absolutely be a podcast on my book coming up, and I'm really looking forward to it. But the point of the book was very similar to this, which is we have had company after company after company tell us that they will no longer allow us to do wills and to do asset protection after death. So that was a very easy thing that we did for, pretty much my entire career, my 20-year career, where we would do a will, we would name a separate share trust or a trust under the will, and that would then go to the kids or to the spouse protected. but we've had at least 7 to 9 companies now tell us that they will not allow it. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand it. I don't get the logic. I don't get the why, and no one's been able to give me the why. The closest I got was an attorney for one of the companies said, we don't like that we're naming a trust that is not set up until death. We believe that it's ripe for fraud, that there's too much wiggle room for stuff to be manipulated, and that's why. I don't buy that. And the reason I don't buy it is because it is common practice to name an estate as a beneficiary on certain type of assets. Well, that's the same thing, right? The estate doesn't get raised until a person dies. An estate doesn't happen until the death. Well, what's the difference? I really don't understand it. I really don't get it. But I have proof and data and hours, probably hundreds of hours with my team talking to companies, trying to explain why this is very common and why we've done it for 20 years and never had an issue. It got to a point where when you lose too many of them, because let's face it, the company has the choice to accept it or not, right? That's up to them. And if you go to a client and say, your company's not cooperating, let's go somewhere else, not only do you upset the client, you upset the company, you upset the referral source, you upset the people. So it's a very delicate balance to be able to just say, okay, we have to go a different route. The clients have already drafted the docs. So that was a huge one. I mean, and that might be one of the biggest ones because now we're not able to use wills for asset protection after death. And, I've already expressed some of the concerns that I have with the outright will. The one that I didn't mention yet is in probate, which a will must go through probate, right? That is the definition of a will. Assets in your name alone at the time of your death go through your will. The will must go through probate. Probate is the state's process to carry out your wishes, right? And again, I'm not blaming probate. It's not probate's fault. Probate is not a thing, right? It's just the rule book. It's just what the state says. But when you dig into it, one of the things that it says is that after you advertise an estate, creditors have 1 year to move forward to essentially be able to get paid if they have a valid claim. Now, as an executor, you are personally liable if you don't get the taxes paid right, if you don't get the process done correctly, if creditors aren't notified correctly, if you don't give them an opportunity to come forward, if you distribute and ultimately a creditor comes forward with a valid claim, you are personally liable for it. So as the attorney for the estate, man, I got to be real careful in allowing all the money to be distributed because we don't know, right? First of all, every now and then you have to pay more in tax if something comes up, if the Department of Revenue challenges something that you took as a deduction, or if something occurs. And then on top of that, you have these creditors who can come forward in a year after death. So in a lot of situations, we hold off in distributing the money. Maybe not 100% of it, but definitely all of it for certain. And in most cases, a large majority of it to ensure that the executor doesn't have liability. Well, who gets upset? The beneficiaries, right? Those people who know that they're inheriting money. And what do they think, right? They think it's going to happen tomorrow. They think mom dies on Monday, they get the money on Tuesday, and life goes on. And in reality, it could be 9 months to a year before they actually get the money. Well, they're calling my office screaming. They're calling the executor screaming. The executor's calling me screaming. The executor's calling the advisor. The advisor's calling me screaming. And we do education. We tell them up front that that's not going to be the case. We tell them up front why the money's going to be held up. But what I'm learning after 20 years is that nobody hears you until it happens to them. And then they still didn't hear you, but now they never heard it and it's your fault. So we're seeing that happen a lot more. I think that's becoming more of the norm. And one way to kind of get around that, one way to get the assets distributed more quickly, one way to give the trustee responsibility to take care of all of that and to handle it and get access to the money more quickly is through a trust, right? I always stood up in front of a room and said, waiting to pay creditors in death is not a big deal, and creditors know that they may not get paid. But nobody heard me. Nobody agreed with me. Nobody. All these executors were saying to me, hey, I want to get it paid. Mom was never late on a bill, and she's not going to be late on my watch. I'm not going to be the reason she was late on a bill for the first time. And although that was never important to me, it was important to my clients. It was important to my executors. So I had to hear that. I had to admit that I was wrong. Maybe not wrong for me personally, but I can't inject my personal feelings on the process. So case after case after case, we were doing wills and people were concerned about the money being tied up until we could open the estate, until we could get the account open. I didn't think it was a big deal, but they did, and they do. And I didn't think it was a big deal to hold off on the beneficiaries not getting the money for a year to ensure that everything was done properly, to ensure that the taxes were paid, to ensure that creditors had a right to come forward. But they didn't hear it. They didn't care. The executors didn't want it that way. The trust is the answer, right? The trust allows those distributions to be made immediately after death to pay bills. We can pay out distributions much faster. So that certainly was a huge reason why, we ended up starting the process towards the trusts. And then I had a huge case that happened within the last several months. So this gentleman comes into my office about 10 years ago, and he and his wife were interested in asset protection. It was a referral from an advisor who I'm very close with. And at the end of the meeting, this happens, right? The client decided that he did not want to move forward with the trust. And really, when you dug into it, what do you think the reason was that he didn't want to move forward? Single-handedly, one reason. What do you think? Cost, right? Absolutely. 100% cost. And he acknowledged it. I mean, he didn't hide it, right? He absolutely straight up just said it was cost. I'm not going to pay that kind of money to protect assets for something that I don't think is going to happen. Okay, fine. Understand it. It's your decision. Went with a base plan. As I said earlier, that was a very common thing that was happening in my 20-year career. Way more wills were done in our office than trust ever were. And that is fine, except 5 years later, he came back into the office because his wife got diagnosed with dementia. Okay, all right, we can help, right? As you've listened on these podcasts, if you've heard in workshops, we absolutely can still help in crisis. It's more expensive, it's a lot more stressful, but currently in Pennsylvania, we're still able to do it. What didn't he like, right? This gentleman had, let's just call it, $1.5 million, right? And he knows that he needs to get her care. He can't care for her anymore. It was getting to the point where he was like, all right, I need help. Something's wrong. They figured out what was wrong, but that didn't change the fact that he still needed help. So he started paying for essentially skilled level care in the home and was having agencies come in and assist. And over the course of the next 5 years, he lost just shy of $500,000. $500,000 for care in the home was lost for this gentleman. And eventually his advisor figured out what was going on and figured out, holy cow, he didn't hear a thing that he said. He didn't hear a thing that Jeff tried to explain to him, that Jeff could help. Jeff could protect the money. The laws allow for it in Pennsylvania. And her income was beneath the waiver income cap limit that we've talked about on the podcast. So we were able to help. But he didn't want to do it because he didn't want what? To pay for it. He didn't want the cost. So, long story short, after losing $500,000, he comes back recently. We helped him. We protected the remainder of just a little over $1 million. He's happy. He got the result he wanted. Now, he did pay. And the cost is still to this day an issue. He still mentions it every now and then. And it's very difficult because in those original meetings, as I always stress the importance of asset protection. I give statistics. I tell my clients what the chances are that they're going to need long-term care. I beg them to do a trust. I did everything that day in that meeting short of getting on my hands and knees and begging the gentleman. I tried every technique. I tried explaining it. I tried giving stories. All he heard was the cost. Bottom line, he heard the cost. That's it. So he didn't do it. And so we were able to protect everything. And one of the things that struck me was as he was leaving, he was very happy that his wife was getting care, very happy that we were able to preserve the remainder of the assets. I mean, and yes, he was upset about the money that he lost, but the one comment that he made to me was, you need to do a better job in showing the value. You need to do a better job of making me understand why that was a stupid decision in that moment. When all I heard was money, you needed to make sure that it wasn't about it. It was about value. It was about the nursing home and losing everything and long-term care and in-home care. And I looked at him and I said, but I did. I gave you every story I had. I can't force you to do something. And I will admit, I've lost a lot of sleep over that conversation. I think about it. I think about his face. I think about his comments. I think about everything. And I take that to heart. You know, my one dear friend who's an attorney said, Jeff, you know, you can't own that. You gave him a choice. He made a decision. He ultimately made the decision based on money. But that's his call. That's his choice. That's his decision. You can't own any of that. That isn't your fault. I know. But I still see him every night in bed. I still think about that conversation. I still think about his eyes and the way he looked at me. And it hurts. When you can't sleep at night and you're thinking about something. And no, I didn't do anything wrong, certainly. And yes, I tried everything. I did everything to try to explain the importance. But I realized in that moment that it's hard for people to make decisions when they don't think it's going to happen to them, when they don't think that it's something that they should be concerned about. They've never heard about it. They've never been warned about it. This is the first time it's coming up. And that's not their fault. It isn't. It isn't at all. And so I need to try to do a better job of expressing the value and the importance. And it's tough. It's real tough. But the result in that case was a great result. We were able to protect just over $1 million. And eventually his wife did have to go to long-term care. He loves the care she's receiving. He loves everything that's occurring. He sees her every day. And it's a great result. But I'm haunted by that conversation. So, yes, I am at a place now in my life after 20 years of practice that I think that asset protection trusts are the way to go. I think that getting the house protected at a minimum is a no-brainer, right? Let's get that house protected. Let's make sure that at a minimum we don't have to worry about that house. And once the house is protected after 5 years and 1 day of not needing long-term care, then if you need long-term care, we have a lot of other options, right? We have possibilities. We have money that was left outside the trust. We can still pay for care for a while. We can still do other things. We can buy a house that would be exempt. We could, the sky's the limit. But the truth is, it's the flexibility that we need, right? We need flexibility. And by doing the trust, you absolutely, unequivocally get the ability to have flexibility to make choices later. Okay, Jeff, when should I do this? Well, 5 years and 1 day before you need long-term care. Wait, what? How do I know when that's going to be? We don't, right? And that is exactly the point. But you do need 5 years for the money to be fully 100% protected. So now is the time to act. Now is the time to look into it. And sure, will trust save you a lot of money on the back end? Absolutely. There's no question, right? The average cost in Pennsylvania for a lawyer, for probate administration, is right around 5%, right? So when you're looking at a trust that typically on average attorneys are charging 2% for, right there is a 2% versus 5% difference. That is a massive, massive difference in terms of cost. For somebody with millions of dollars, you're looking at $30,000 difference. Well, the difference in a trust and in a will, we're just talking a couple measly $1,000, not $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 or $60,000. So, yes, the clients who have done the trusts love it. It's cheaper on the back end by far. And I was underestimating that. I was underestimating how much less it would be. Now that we're doing more of them, people are loving it. The money gets distributed faster. The trustee can act immediately and be able to pay bills. It does asset protection after death. It does asset protection during life if you choose that trust. There's also a revocable trust that you could do that would not provide asset protection, but would give you all the other benefits. So, the answer to the question that the advisor asked me is yes, there has been a change in me. There has been a change in my philosophy, in my firm, in the other attorneys in the office, Dan and Carrie. The longer, we've all been practicing right around 20 years. And collectively, we've got about 60 years of experience. And we're all seeing the same thing. We're all feeling the same cases. We're all getting feedback from our team members. We're all getting feedback from our clients. And, all I remember making my decisions on earlier were, well, they'll have to pay a little more up front. But to save the kind of money that they're going to save on the back end, to have the asset protection, to have the distributions done quicker, to have all of that stuff, there is a huge value in that. And now I have a very difficult time doing a base will. I struggle with it. I don't think I'm doing the right thing for the client. Yes, it's still an option. Yes, we still do them. There's no doubt. But it is very difficult to find a case that is ripe for that. Extremely difficult, especially if somebody owns a home. You'd be really hard-pressed to convince me that a trust is not the answer. Not only during life, but also after death, for speed of distribution, ease of handling it, not having to open an estate, not having to pay higher fees to lawyers, not having to pay extra fees to county and state. I could go on for hours about why my philosophy has changed. But here's the bottom line. I listen to my clients, right? We have thousands of clients over the 20-year period that I've met. And I was imputing some of my feelings on what I thought they should do because I thought saving them a few dollars up front was what they wanted. And now I realize that isn't the case. They're willing to pay for value. They're willing to get the assets protected during life and get it so that they can distribute them after death how they want, when they want, the way they want, which is asset protected for their spouse, asset protection for their kids. And please, if you would like to learn more about trusts, watch some of our other podcasts on trusts, come to our free educational workshops that we are offering every single week. And we have workshops in estate planning and crisis planning, special needs planning, probate administration, trust administration. If you name it, you can get education for free. My entire motto is not to allow what happened to my mother to happen to your family. And what happened to my family happened to yours. I want you to be educated. I want you to know the answers before you're in the nursing home or in the hospital. So please, come to a workshop. We are offering the 3 secrets to protect your family on a weekly basis, which is our estate planning workshops where we will talk about trusts. We would love to see you there, and we would love to be able to assist you and your family. And yes, you absolutely should look into trusts. No question. And if you're an existing client who's saying, man, that's a little different than what he said 5, 10, 15, 18 years ago, it is. It is. I was wrong. I'm getting more mature, and I'm learning from my mistakes. So please give me an opportunity to explain the why. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thank you for joining me on the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show, hosted by me, yours truly, Jeffrey Belomo, where we discuss all things estate planning and elder law. And, well, hey, anything else we want to talk about. We'd love to have you on the next podcast of the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show. Until then, have a wonderful day. Hi, I'm Jeff Belomo with Belomo and Associates. I would like to personally invite you to listen to the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show. On our next show, we are going to talk about trusts and why trusts are so important and why trusts are becoming more and more prevalent each and every day. Join me on the podcast so that you can hear the reasons why, the examples, and the stories. And even if you have a base will, or maybe you even have a trust, still worth listening to learn how the law has changed, opinions have changed, views have changed, process has changed, and how we can help you with the use of a trust. All right, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you on the Red Wagon Estate Planning and Elder Law Show. Hope to see you there.